Department of Environmental Quality. And as for participants, we'll have the participant list available. So let's see, so that should be good. And I'll introduce each of the speakers as we go. For the in-kind form, if you put in any time for this meeting, for your presentations or other preparation, please email Lee Comrie with your estimated time for the in-kind form so that we can have that documented for our meeting. So you can see on the slide. And then our next thing would be to approve the meeting summary from our December 4th meeting. If you have any changes, please unmute yourself and let us know of any changes. But if we don't have any changes for those minutes, we'll move to approve by consensus rather than doing an individual vote from everyone. And we'll go ahead and approve those. So if anybody has any changes, go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll wait for a minute or so here and see if we have any changes for those meeting minutes. Hearing no changes for those minutes, we'll go ahead and approve the December 4th, 2020 EPAC meeting summary by consensus. And then we'll move on to our first presentation. Our first presentation is on regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And this presentation will be given by Dustin Fitzpatrick. He is the Air Quality Planning Coordinator for PAG.
Hi, thank you, Sarah.
And Dustin will probably give you about 12 to 14 minutes to start for your presentation. If it goes a little bit over, that's okay. But I'll probably chime in at about 12 minutes and give you a heads up. And then we'll take questions after.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Dustin Fitzpatrick. I'm the Air Quality Planning Coordinator for PAG, and I'll be providing an update of the regional greenhouse gas emission inventory that we conduct for the greater Tucson region. I'll go over a summary of the process of conducting the inventory, the general findings of the previous report, and provide a timeline for updating the current report. So like I said, PAG is currently updating the regional inventory. The biennial update is due for release this June. So whereas the previous inventory covered the years 2012 through 2017, this inventory will cover 2014 through 2019. This time frame will essentially add data for the calendar years of 2018 and 2019, while including the previous data from 2014 to 2017, which will allow for the identification of trends and emission changes. So energy and fuel usage, along with water and waste data, has been collected from Pima County and City of Tucson governments for their operations. The electric and natural gas production and emission factors have been collected from the various power utilities and Southwest Gas. And EPA and US Energy Information Administration data was also collected for the Navajo Generating Station emissions. Aviation fuel usage data was collected from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Tucson International Airport, Marana Air Park, Ryan Airfield, and La Cholla Air Park. Union Pacific Railroad provided locomotive fuel data usage. Waste data was collected from Marana Landfill, Speedway Landfill, and Tucson Waste and Recycling. Then data was collected for industrial energy usage by Cal Portland Cement and from Marana Water Reclamation for treatment and Catran for transit fuel usage. Other transit and commuter fuel usage data was also collected from the City of Tucson and from PAG. So this is the geographic area for the inventory, which is the focus. It's basically the greater Tucson area and eastern Pima County. That blue outline you see captures emissions from the main inventory area, which includes the region's various jurisdictional areas, and is referred to in the report as the Eastern Pima County community. So then the green outline will represent a subset of the Eastern Pima County community inventory, which is referred to as emissions from the city of Tucson community. It's essentially the city limits. Then there are two other subsets of the Eastern Pima County community included in the inventory, which are the city of Tucson government and Pima County government, which represent emissions from the respective government operations. So there are three sources used for emission calculations in the inventory. PAG subscribes to a membership with ICLEI, which is formerly the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. They now refer to themselves as ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, which grants access to the ClearPath online greenhouse gas emissions calculator. ClearPath is the leading online software platform for completing greenhouse gas inventories, forecasts, climate action plans, and monitoring at the community-wide or government operation scales. The ClearPath tool has been used to calculate emissions for previous inventories and calculates emissions from energy, waste, water and wastewater, and aircraft and locomotives. The EPA Motor Vehicle Emissions Simulator, or MOVES, is an emission modeling system used for mobile sources. PAG uses MOVES to calculate emissions for transportation conformity and emission reductions for our travel reduction program, generally in terms of criteria pollutants. But the model is also used to calculate greenhouse gas emissions from mobile sources. So the emissions can be modeled for various vehicle source types, such as passenger and commercial buses and single unit combination trucks. And emission factors can also be separated by fuel types as well. Then there's the EPA's waste reduction model, which is a tool that calculates emissions and energy reductions resulting from alternative waste management practices such as recycling. Calculations are based on the difference between emissions and energy expended if materials were landfilled versus being recycled. So here I'll go over the emission sources. They're categorized in the report as stationary energy use, transportation, waste, industrial processes, and other. Stationary energy is separated into residential, commercial, and industrial sectors. The residential sector greenhouse gas emissions are based on household energy use, such as for heating, cooling, and lighting. The commercial sector includes energy used in non-residential buildings, such as schools, hospitals, retail, institutional, and government-owned facilities. And the industrial sector includes energy used in mining, agriculture, and manufacturing operations. Transportation includes on-road emissions from private and commercial vehicle travel and public transit. Non-road emissions are from agricultural, commercial, industrial, and construction vehicles, lawn and garden equipment, and airport and railroad support vehicles. And then there are locomotives and aircraft for transportation. The waste includes solid waste disposal and wastewater reclamation. Recycling is noted here in the report as an informational item in terms of emission savings. The industrial processes include cement production, and the other category includes emissions from water delivery through the Central Arizona Project canal network. So the three target greenhouse gases are accounted for in carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Per the fifth assessment of the International Panel on Climate Change, methane has 28 times the global warming potential of CO2, and nitrous oxide has 265 times the global warming potential of CO2. So the CO2 equivalents are derived from the addition of CO2 plus any relevant methane and nitrous oxide multiplied by their global warming potential factors. So this is a bit of a recap for the inputs that go into the Eastern Pima County community and the contributions from the various emission categories identified in the previous inventory. So the pie charts will show the findings from the 2012 to 17 statistics. So in the Eastern Pima County community, which is the overall inventory, you've got the stationary energy with the residential, commercial, industrial sectors, transportation, which is your private and commercial aircraft, non-road locomotives, and transit. The industrial processes are Cal Portland cement, essentially. You can see on the pie chart that's represented in industrial processes there. 6% of the total emissions in the county are coming from cement production. And you've got waste, which is solid waste, wastewater reclamation, and then other, which is the energy used to deliver the water from CAP. And there you can see the blue pie section, that equals 2%. So these are the inputs for the City of Tucson community subset and the regional inventory and the relevant contributions from the different emission categories from our previous report. You can see there's stationary energy from residential, commercial, industrial. You got your transportation with the private, commercial, non-road, and transit. The waste with the solid waste, wastewater reclamation, and then CAP. So similar to the Eastern Pima County, but just for the City of Tucson. Then this is the City of Tucson government subset of the inventory with the inputs and relevant contributions. And note that the inclusion of CAP energy use through Tucson Water increases the stationary and energy contribution. And then we also account for employee commuting for the city workers, which we derive from our travel reduction program statistics. And last, we have the Pima County government subset of the inventory with the inputs and results from the most recent inventory. Employee commuting is also included. Less influence from CAP as the county is not the water utility owner. And so these are the next steps for the inventory that's currently underway. This month, our modeling section will complete the MOVES modeling of the transportation emissions for the region and for the government inventories. The discrepancies with the previous inventory will be resolved, just such as inputs for the greenhouse gas emission factors and unit conversions, such as US to metric tons, make sure everything was lined up in the previous report. So then the final draft document will be completed, and at the end of this month or beginning of May, that draft document will be provided to the EPAC and AQS committee members for review and comment for a couple-week period. Then we'll incorporate any feedback and necessary changes into a final document, and the final document will be put forth for approval at the June committee meeting. So I'll be happy to take any questions. And again, once that inventory is completed in June, be happy to do a presentation providing for the findings in that inventory.
All right, thank you, Dustin. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and let us know.
Just to remind people, there is the raise hand feature. So if I'm not sure there'll be huge numbers of questions, but if there are and it seems easier to raise your hand, that is an option.
Right. Seeing no questions or any raised hands in the participants list. Thank you, Dustin, and we'll look forward to the next time.
Yeah, thanks everyone for
Have an
listening and
update.
for those who participated in providing data for the updated report.
So our next presentation is a PFAS update, and this will be given by representatives from Tucson Water and Marana Water. We have two presenters. John Kamik is the current interim director of Tucson Water. He started with Tucson Water in 1999, left in 2012 to become the director of Marana Water, and then returned to Tucson Water in 2019 as a deputy director. He is currently the president of the Southern Arizona Water Users Association and past president of the Water Use Arizona. He sits on the board of directors for the Arizona Water Association. The other presenter is Stephen Dean, and he is the water deputy director for the town of Marana. Stephen began working for the town of Marana in 2014, and he has over 25 years of experience in potable and reclaimed water operations and maintenance and regulatory compliance. So we'll hand over the presentation to John and Stephen.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
All right, good. All right, let's see. Let me get my control buttons here, see if they work.
And I'll do the same, John and Stephen, as I'll give you about 12 minutes each for presentation, and then if I'll give you a little warning at 12 minutes, and then if we go a little over, that's all right, and we'll take questions for both of you at the end.
Okay. All right. There's the control buttons. All right, let's see. Okay. Morning, everybody. Like Sarah said, I'm John Kamik. I'm current interim director at Tucson Water, and we've been asked to give a update to you guys on our current PFAS management strategy at Tucson Water. This is something that I know Tucson Water and Marana Water has done, I believe, a few times over the past several years. And so my presentation will focus a little bit on the past to make sure everybody's grounded on where we are with PFAS historically in the Tucson region, as well as then more detailed focus on where we are currently and what we're looking at going forward. And then I'll be handing it off to Stephen to talk about Marana Waters. Okay, let's see here. So in my presentation, going quickly over the regulatory overview or lack thereof, and then I'll chat a little bit about the TARP, that's the Tucson Airport Remediation Project, and how this interplays with the TARP project. And then lastly, for what we're seeing, not directly in our potable system, but our potable water system sources with regards to PFAS and how Tucson Water's management strategy to avoid PFAS going forward. Regulatory overview. For those of you, hopefully most people in this committee, since your guys are involved in environmental programs, understand about the PFAS is a national concern. Actually, it's a global concern, taken on a lot of accelerated, particularly over the last 5 years, with the advent of better analytical methods and procedures to be able to detect these compounds in lower and lower detection limits in the part per trillion range. Just really quick, perfluorinated and poly and perfluorinated alkyl substances are substances that were developed pretty much and went into production after World War II. Anything that was a good stain repellent, anything that was a good water repellent. So you think about your 3M Scotch guarding, you think about Teflon, you think about Gore-Tex compounds, things like that for most people worked really well over the last 50 years, and we used them in our personal lives and in our workplace to protect carpeting, furniture, all things like that. Those products were perfluorinated compounds. They're a very strong electric structure, and they worked well for those type of products like water repellent and stain repellents. The other thing that perfluorinated compounds were used for and used in massive quantities was the creation of firefighting foams over the last several decades. Again, pretty much since the 1950s forward. And those firefighting foams were used extensively at places like military facilities and airports and fire districts, not only around the country, but around the world, because it was able to, that foam, and I'm sure everybody's seen videos or seen an accident where fuel is involved. That foam is able to get between the fuel source and the oxygen in the atmosphere and snuff out a fire really quickly. So it was a good product for that. It's still a good product for that. Now it's formulated a little differently, but that's where large quantities of this been used. So in many states across the country, you are seeing either surface water or groundwater contamination now with perfluorinated compounds are generally related to airport or military style functions, training facilities and whatnot. So Tucson Water has known about perfluorinated compounds since 2009. And when the initial EPA health guidance levels were set out for that, we've been tracking this not only in our aquifer, but keeping track of what's been going on regulatorily across the country. It is a health guidance. It is not a drinking water standard. So any activity, just to throw in a point, any activity Tucson Water has been doing, any activity Marana Water has been doing, and when Stephen gets his presentation, is all voluntary. We had not been asked to do anything regulatorily, in particular in Marana, at all. Tucson started testing for this at a regulatory standpoint as part of its unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. Since it's a large utility, we are asked by EPA to look for certain compounds every now and then to identify any presence in the environment. So later in the last 10 years, it's been in our unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. So we've been looking for it. But prior to that, and any actions related to that has been strictly predominantly voluntary. So Tucson, in an effort to stay ahead and stay conservative in its approach in dealing with perfluorinated compounds, we are looking at the guidance of what a lot of other states are doing, states that have better funded public health departments or departments in environmental quality. So you see it's most of the industrial states, the Midwest and the East Coast, where a lot of these compounds were used and a lot of the environmental releases have occurred. They've now developed a lot of their own standards based on this that are different in many cases from what the EPA guidance level is. EPA guidance level on the health advisory level in the upper left there is that just for two compounds, PFOA and PFOS, should be less than 70 nanograms per liter or part per trillion in drinking water. There currently is no environmental, like soil or groundwater cleanup levels. Those are being propagated actively as we speak. So by looking at what's happening nationally with our other neighboring states and how they're addressing it, and then knowing what that guidance level is from the EPA and where the state of the industry is going with regards to perfluorinated compounds, Tucson Water has actually developed operational targets for 6 of those compounds, the 2 that currently have an advisory, PFOS and PFOA, and then we added 4 others that we tend to commonly see in the environment in the Tucson region to that list, and that's based on guidance from other states on what they're doing. So the EPA guidance is a combined 70 part per trillion for PFOA and PFOS. Well, you see Tucson Water standard here, PFOS is 7 and PFOA is 11. So our combined standard is roughly around 18. But we don't stop there. We add in 2 other compounds that we're seeing that have no regulatory guidance from EPA or others, and that's PFHXS and PFHPA. We see them in our environment. Some other states are looking at them. I believe we've looked at the criteria from either, I think it was New Jersey or Michigan. And so we add those 2 as well as PFOA and PFOS to our operational target of 18, not to exceed when you add those 4 together. 2 other additional compounds that we see in the environment. One is PFHXA and one is PFBS. Those have a much higher level, part per trillion level, and that is also reflected in what other states are doing that have been studying this, as well as information we've been seeing in the toxicological effects related to those compounds show that they can be at a much higher level because the residual time that they spend in the human body, if consumed, is very short. And that's one of the biggest drivers on a lot of this is the biological uptake, and then how long they remain in the human body or any type of mammal. PFOA, PFOS, PFHXS, all those could have a half-life of remaining in a body in the order of years, 5 to 7 to 8 years, where the two at the bottom, PFHXA, PFBS, is much shorter. That's on the order of days. So all this toxicological effects, how prevalent it is in the environment, how economical it is to clean up, all those things pertain in creating a drinking water standard. So all those things are still being evaluated, and one of the reasons why EPA has not gotten to a drinking water standard as of yet. So where's the two predominant areas we see PFASs in the Tucson area? One of them is located in and around the TARP facility, and the other one, as I mentioned, will be in other locations that are in our potable water sources. So let's talk about the history of TARP for a moment. TARP was originally a Superfund site identified for the cleanup of trichloroethylene, or TCE. It was started, a treatment plant was started in 1994 to help remove TCEs and some other residual volatiles that were located in a plume emanating from in and around the Tucson airport area. There's several stakeholders involved in this. The city of Tucson's predominant role in the TARP Superfund project is to mitigate highly impacted areas of the plume emanating from TARP north of Los Reales Road, and doing the containment to make sure that it didn't spread further into the aquifer system in the city of Tucson. So two primary well fields, a south well field that attacked and has been remediating higher concentrations of TCE, and then the north well field that has also been doing the same, but is used more or less to make sure that plume doesn't continue to travel north. And so that process has been going on since the mid-90s. The early treatment process was done by air stripping, and air stripping is an effective treatment process for TCE removal, and that's why the city and the stakeholders chose that process at the time. Let's fast forward a little bit. Now, 2002, EPA contacted several Superfund sites across the country, like the Tucson Airport Remediation Project, and told us that they were starting to notice a co-contaminant with those types of activities or those types of environmental releases, a co-contaminant called 1,4-dioxane. They asked the city of Tucson to look into it. Of course, we found it. We were common as well with the other Superfund sites across the state, across the country. So we started looking at how do you remove 1,4-dioxane, because the air stripping process used for TCE is not effective for 1,4-dioxane. It's a much more stable chemical that does not like to volatilize with the air stripping treatment process, so it had to be removed a different way if we wanted to remove it. 1,4-dioxane, much like PFAS is today, is an unregulated contaminant. EPA has guidance, but they have not regulated it as of yet as a drinking water standard. So we start looking at new processes. One of those processes is an advanced oxidation process. Fast forward a few years after that, 2011, EPA changes the health advisory. It was 3.5 part per billion. They lowered it by moving the decimal place 1 point and went to 0.35. So all of a sudden, this became an issue for how we were operating the TARP remedy and providing that treated water to the Tucson water customers, because we were now going to be struggling to be able to maintain those levels. So city decided we need to continue to treat this, and we need to continue our obligations under Superfund to continue the TCE treatment process. So they started developing and designing a TCE and 1,4-dioxane treatment process. In the last early 2010s, I guess is the way to say it, to remove both. And again, it was that advanced oxidation. So by 2014, down at the TARP facility, the air stripping process now that was not effective for 1,4-dioxane. Now there was an effective treatment process just constructed called the advanced oxidation process. Then the advanced oxidation essentially adds hydrogen peroxide to the water recovered from the well fields and then hits it with a strong ultraviolet light, creating hydroxyl radicals, which then are able to break apart organic compounds like TCE and 1,4-dioxane into smaller harmless components. And then that water then is safe for consumption. It's a very strong way to treat water and a very clean way to do it. One of the things you end up with in an advanced oxidation process using hydrogen peroxide is you end up with those hydroxyl radicals that may not be fully consumed by whatever organic contaminants are in the water. So you need a final stage process, which is quenching the water. And the treatment process for quenching the water or deactivating the water before it can be released to the distribution system was chosen to be granular activated carbon. Very effective in doing that. A lot of organic carbon is that organic, doing that in large quantity, having the water pass through it, the water is quenched, the activity is taken out of the water is ready for final potable distribution. And that's a very important thing as we head down this PFAS path and why I'm explaining it here.
John, you're at a little over 13 minutes, almost 14 minutes.
Okay. How many more minutes do I got?
About 2.
Oh, all right. Then this will be quick then. Okay, here's a schematic of the treatment process. Hopefully many of you have seen it, kind of what I just described. Now the PFAS history, 2009, like I mentioned, we started seeing it. We detected some PFAS detections at TARP by 2013. Again, no real guidance for EPA, but all of a sudden they changed the health guidance of 400 to 200 to 70 part per trillion. This became more of an issue for Tucson water because now we're starting to get into areas where we found PFAS in our aquifer that was very close to that advisory level. We make the determination at the time to start to mitigate and ensure we're mitigating at TARP below our operational targets, but then also looking throughout our potable source water system to make sure that other areas were not producing this water and sending it in the system. Thankfully, we use granular activated carbon at TARP because that was giving us a treatment mechanism that we were unknowingly treating for PFAS compounds because we chose that quenching method. So that was a good thing. But what that means is now we have to change the carbon. Instead of for peroxide quenching, which would have lasted years, carbon is changed frequently. We're doing it about every 5 to 7 months now. We've done multiple changes now that we're monitoring for PFAS. The good news is our treated water ending up in the community is well below our operational targets, mostly, I would say almost all the time, below even detection limits. Going to our potable system. So here's an overview of the Tucson water wellfield map. Besides what's been found near the airport properties, we've also had a large detections of perfluorinated compounds coming from the northwest corner of the Davis Mountain facility, as well as along the Santa Cruz and in the northwest side of Tucson's aquifer going into the town of Marana. Just a snapshot on the focus area just north of Davis Mountain. You can see some of the aquifer levels here. There's an Air Force One right at the fence line of Davis Mountain Airport Base, and one of their monitor wells, they have perfluorinated compounds at 14,000 part per trillion for PFOA and PFOS. As the health advisory, as a reminder, is 70 for those two compounds. They're in over 10,000 in those areas. So there's a significant plume going out. We've engaged with ADEQ quickly in this process and asked the state to help identify what's leaving the base and come up with a plan for that. So ADEQ has been working with us, and they've had dedicated funding from the WARF program for the Central Tucson PFAS study. They've been working in that area north of the base now and identified a concentrated plume heading towards the Tucson Water Central well field, which we were concerned about. And so ADEQ is now in the development of a treatment plan for that to stop this plume from migrating any further into the Tucson Water Central well field. Our wells in this area have been shut down as our mitigation process right now is avoidance. So that's our primary mitigation strategy, is to turn wells off and to go to different areas of source water. And that wraps up that was the quick part on the potable side. But just to mention again, so there's several areas. There's 3 primary areas where PFAS is located, and this will segue into Stephen's conversation. The 2 I focused on TARP, and then quickly the Davis-Mountain area, where we're with our support of ADEQ taking the lead there. And then that last area is along the Santa Cruz River in the northwest side of Tucson, entering the town of Marana. And with that, I will turn it over to Stephen.
And we'll take questions for both John and Stephen at the end of Stephen's presentation. And Stephen, I'll start you off with 12 minutes, and then I'll let you know when you're at 12 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, John. In similar nature to Tucson Water, I'll be discussing Marana Water's PFAS and 1,4-dioxane treatment strategies. Let's see, I don't have control. Can you give me control, Sarah?
Stephen?
Yes.
Yeah, you go ahead and click over onto, there you go, you got it now. Click on the slide and then you should be able to use your arrows.
Okay. There we go. Okay, today's agenda, Marana's unregulated compound background. I'll also illustrate the service areas or water system and zones impacted. Also, I'll give a water treatment campus overview, and also I'll illustrate the design criteria and treated water quality operational targets, and I'll also give an update on the status of our 2 water treatment campus facilities. In 2009, the EPA Drinking Water Health Advisory for PFAS was established. And at that point in time, in 2011, as John mentioned before, the 1,4-dioxane level was actually reduced down to 0.35 parts per million. Okay. In 2016, the health advisory for PFOA and PFAS combined were reduced to 70 parts per trillion. At that point in time, discretionary samples confirmed that we actually had 1,4-dioxane in a few of our wells, and we actually at that time felt compelled to notify our customer base. In 2017, based on discretionary sampling, we confirmed the presence of PFAS in some of our water systems. We at that time notified our customer base to that effect. We also notified ADQ, and they, on their behalf, supported the assessments that we were doing at the time. Also, during that same time frame, we brought on board Corolla Engineering for a groundwater quality improvement evaluation and implementation plan. And we also finalized that report at that time. We presented our findings to town council. They felt compelled to be proactive to provide treatment at 2 different locations out in our water system. We actually acquired a WIFA loan. I know that says 15 million, and it actually ended up being 16.1 million respectively for both treatment campuses combined. In 2019, we continued moving forward with Corolla Engineering with the design. Also during that same time frame, we brought on board a contractor with the CMAR process at 30% design, and we developed the CMAR team between Corolla, Archer Western, and the town of Marana. And actually in December of 19, pre-construction started at both facilities. And to where we are today, we have recently received approval of construction for both facilities by ADEQ. The 2 water systems affected were actually the Picture Rocks water treatment campus area, Colonel Reserve 1 and Colonel Reserve 2, which is actually west of I-10, north of Ina Road off of Silverbell. Also, our Airline Lambert Water Treatment Campus facility and zones, that is also west of I-10, south of Abbott Valley Road, close to the new Saguaro Bloom subdivision. During the design process and evaluation with Corroll Engineering, we looked at several different treatment methodologies. Keep in mind that we also had to treat for both 1,4-dioxane and also for PFAS collectively. The GAC was common to both treatment processes. So based on that, it actually penciled out to have GAC along with UV peroxide for 1,4, and the GAC also reduces or removes the PFAS as well. Here's our aniline Lambert site layout. Basically, again, both treatment facilities ended up with exact same treatment processes. Here's our Picture Rock site layout. Again, same exact process and trains. Design criteria for both is actually the treated water quality operational targets are exactly the same in nature. For 1,4, our target is to actually treat it to less than 0.1 parts per billion. And then the PFAS combined, again, the health advisory is 70 parts per billion. Per trillion. We wanted to bring that down. It's similar in nature to Tucson waters. They call out 18. We actually call out 17.5 for that purpose. Again, Picture Rocks is a twin. Just a SCADA snapshot schematic of the overall process and system. Both sites. Our UV system, Trojan. I have lots of pictures. Substantial completion for both facilities were achieved on March 12th. Actually, the airline Lambert or the Sorrel Bloom system is actually treating water 24/7 as we speak. Our Picture Rocks facility, which is by Continental Reserve, we are still in process testing and getting some of the bugs out of that system with the SCADA control and fail-safe parameters that we're putting in place. Any questions?
I got a question from the baby. Baby, everything is fine.
I do have a thought to share. I wanted to thank you both for the really informative presentations. Obviously it's exciting my baby very much. But I really appreciate how open you are with all this information, and congrats on all the proactive treatment that you're doing. And I'm wondering, perhaps through your interactions with SAWA or otherwise, are you working with or hear from very small providers or private wells on how, like, any recommendations they can do to also monitor or treat if necessary?
I guess I'll try to answer that one. Most of the private wells where this type of detection has taken place, I believe individuals associated with PDEQ has reached out to any private well owners in those areas. I think Marie Light's on. I don't know, Marie, if you want to address that.
Yes, I can provide some good information for that. Thank you, John. Well, and thank you, Stephen, Dean, as well. I appreciate both of your company's proactive actions to keep people safe. I know that, John, that the data that you provided, Pima County Department of Environmental Quality identified that there was a danger for a potential danger for private wells in the area just north of the airport. And so we took all that the private well information and did a scan of potential private well owners, and then partnered with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality to contact each one of the well owners. So there were letters that were sent out to each one of the potential well owners, and anybody who responded, we were willing to go out and collect samples. And anyone who had a well that had the presence of PFAS then was provided a different potable source of water. So they're essentially given bottled water. There is a continuing group of people who are meeting on a monthly basis that include certainly Tucson Water and the in Marana. There's state agencies. The EPA is participating, as well as a number of the military organizations that are associated with the airport there. And everybody is wonderfully working together. I do want to say that when there was the initial TCE plume that was developed, it took a decade before we were able to figure out where the plume was and what to do about it. This time, you could measure it in weeks of identifying where there were private wells that could be impacted and immediate contact. So the proactive activities that were taking place were throughout the community, and that continues to this day.
Thank you, Marie.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I believe Roxanne Lindsley has a question. She's her hand raised and is unmuted at this time.
Thank you. John, I want to say thank you for that wonderful first slide with the across the country. I look forward to when PAG sends them out, because that was an awesome summary. And I hadn't seen anything like that before. So kudos if you stole that from someone else, and really great kudos if you guys put it together by yourself. And then Stephen, for Marana, since you guys picked up 1,4-dioxane, does that mean you guys had TCE too and you just didn't know prior?
No TCE in Marana that I can validate.
Okay.
So Roxanne, to add on that, there is a low level signature of 1,4-dioxane in the wastewater stream that ends up as effluent in the Santa Cruz River, and that's probably due to personal care products like shampoos, cologne, perfumes, the stuff that the community is using.
Oh, that's really good to know. Thank you. I'll share that with my team, because we've, as you know, with ADAQ, we're trying to cover a lot of different areas, as well as finding it across the state more. We are running through our drinking water program, sampling drinking water wells across the state for selected water companies based on where they're located. And that report is a continuation from 2018's report, which is on our website. So thank you for letting me share.
We have a question from Christina McVie. Christina, if you could unmute yourself. It's typically down in the left corner. There you go.
Thank you. Well, John, I'm not surprised at all, because I've seen you develop this presentation, but it's getting better and better. Mead, congratulations on that adorable baby of yours. John, I'm wondering if the slides that you presented, including in particular the one of the US and how things are rapidly developing with new regulations, hopefully now we'll have an EPA that actually cares about public health and safety. Could you share that information? Is there a way is it on the website? Because it's really great, and that you're already treating water at the Airline Lambert site is just phenomenal. Congratulations, that's really quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think that slide will be part of the record here for this PAG meeting, if I'm not mistaken, Sarah. So I believe after this meeting's over, that this presentation should be part of your record, if I'm correct.
I'm thinking that it's really going to be very important to let the public know more about the fact that treatment is already happening in certain areas and that efforts are ongoing. amazingly uninformed about this, but very concerned about it. And I don't think they realize just how proactive folks have been.
Yeah. I can't speak for Marana Water, but Stephen's presentation, I know they did a huge public outreach with the commissioning of their two treatment plants that just happened this month. And Stephen, a lot of that outreach is on the Marana Water website, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it is. It's under Project Water.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. So I could get more information from Asia.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, because it may be very well known in Marana or in the immediate vicinity of like Saguaro Bloom. I don't know that it is as well known further afield, but thank you. I'll follow up with Asia.
Okay, we have a question from Kimberly Baez, and this will be the last question we take for these presentations, and then we'll move along. Kimberly?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Sarah. My question is about the disposal of the used granular activated carbon. How is it disposed of and where? I understand that it's still not handled as a hazardous waste after RCRA, but perhaps one of you can correct me.
Yes, I believe that is correct. But the way that we've been disposing it, at least from the TARP treatment process, is a permanent disposal with which involves incineration. So the chain of custody and that life cycle, we make sure that it goes to an incineration site, so it's removed from the environment.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me just make sure there's no other questions. Okay, thank you, John and Stephen, for your presentations. We're going to move along to a presentation on the drought status in Arizona. And this will be by Nemesis Ortiz Declet. Sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly. She's the Arizona Department of Water Resources Drought and Conservation Coordinator. She coordinates the communications between drought, climate, and water experts and brings the most up-to-date Arizona drought information together to share that with stakeholders.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to talk in this meeting. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Nemesis Ortiz Declet. I'm the Drought and Conservation Coordinator at ADWR, and I will be talking about Arizona drought status and weather outlook. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so this is an overview of the things that I will be addressing. So drought categories and impacts in the state, the 2020 long-term drought status in summer, 2021% of normal precipitation, and short-term drought status in current maps. Short 3-month weather outlook, the U.S. seasonal drought outlook, and the activities from the Drought Interagency Coordinating Group. And just briefly explain the 2020 Arizona Drought Preparedness Annual Report. And this table shows the drought categories used to determine what is the status of drought in the United States. The categories are abnormally dry conditions, or D0 in yellow, moderate drought, or D1 in a cream color, severe drought, or D2 in orange, extreme drought, or D3 in bright red, and exceptional drought, or D4 in dark red or maroon. The categories are determined by extensive data and observed impacts provided to drought experts by different stakeholders. And the impacts listed on this slide are for the state of Arizona specifically, and include increases in fire and response, drying soils, and even decreases in surface water supplies. I won't go through them all, but I'm happy to provide the presentation and the sources, so anyone interested might read more about them. Okay, so this slide shows Arizona long-term drought status maps for 2020. These maps were developed by the state climatologist, Dr. Nancy Silver. And throughout, and throughout them, we can see that because Arizona had a lot of great 2019 winter precipitation, long-term drought was significantly reduced throughout the spring of last year. This precipitation had to do with the filling of reservoirs throughout the salt and rated rivers, and with all those white and yellow colors instead of darker red colors throughout the spring. The April to June 2020 long-term drought status map on the middle to the left shows some drought degradation across the state, with the expansion of severe, the orange, and extreme drought, the bright red, in northeastern and some parts of central Arizona. And then we have the July to September 2020 long-term map, which shows additional drought conditions degradation in the state, mainly due to an almost non-existent monsoon and record-breaking high temperatures, which I'll talk about a little bit. The latest map we have is October to December 2020 on the top right of the slide, and it shows significantly increased drought conditions throughout the entire state, which has the potential to impact stream flow and recharge. The next long-term drought status map will be from January to March 2021, and this map will be developed by the state climatologist and will be available on the ADWR website within the next 2 weeks. Okay, so these two maps show how the 2020 monsoon, specifically July through September, represents the warmest on record for most of the state. And this was a trend that even started as far back as April 2020. The red color on the map on the left represents those measurements that broke records. And the orange color represents those much above normal temperatures at the top 10 percentile. And these are places that almost broke temperature records as well. It was also the record driest monsoon for most of Arizona, as you can see the red colors on the right side map. And it was almost record driest for the orange places on the map. This was quite significant, and it wiped out the benefits that were obtained from the previous wet winter that I mentioned. Now, this map shows what the percent of normal precipitation looks like for 2021 so far. This is from December 29, 2020 up to March 28, 2021. And as you can see on the map colors, there's quite a bit of red throughout the map and with a few bright green spots. The red represents the less than 50% of average precipitation, which is quite low. And the green spots in Coconino and Gila counties mean that those areas did receive the amount of average precipitation typically expected during this time. We also have the southwestern corner of the state, which has received a good amount of precipitation, as we can see through those blue, green, and yellow colors. However, the state needs more precipitation to reduce drought conditions. So this slide shows monthly short-term drought status conditions in the past 5 months. We get these maps from the US Drought Monitor, and the difference from the long-term maps is that these use the average standard precipitation indices, or SPI, and standard precipitation and evaporation indices, or SPEI, among other information from the previous 4 weeks, while the long-term maps are based on averages of 24, 36, and 48-month SPEI and SPEIs. Through these maps, we can see how the non-existent and record-breaking warm and dry monsoon last year led to an increase in drought conditions, as you can see in those predominantly red colors. The fall was also extremely dry, and that led to significant drought degradation throughout the state. During the early winter, there was some minimal precipitation and a few storms that led to improved drought conditions in the northeast corner of Arizona, primarily around the Chusca Mountains and in northern Apache County. Then there was a series of cold winter storms in late January that led to improved short-term drought conditions throughout central, southwestern, and northeastern parts of Arizona. During February, precipitation across most of the state was 25% of average, while the White Mountains received near average precipitation. Here we can see what current drought conditions look like for Arizona. This is the short-term drought status map for March 23, 2021. And it shows that approximately 55% of the state is in exceptional drought, represented by the maroon color. 32% is in extreme drought, represented by the bright red color, and 13% is either in abnormally dry conditions, moderate, or severe drought, represented by the yellow, cream, and orange, respectively. Some parts in central, northeastern, and southwestern Arizona are the ones that did receive some precipitation or snow and have therefore lower drought conditions than others. Okay, and this is the official NOAA Climate Prediction Center 3-month precipitation on the left and temperature on the right, outlooks for April, May, and June 2021. According to the maps, the northeastern corner of the state has a 33 to 40% probability of below normal precipitation, as can be seen through the cream colors. And the rest of the state has equal chances of above, below, or near normal precipitation. On the right side map, we can see that according to the colors that we see, there is a 50 to 60% chance probability of above average temperatures for the next 3 months throughout the state. And that is shown by the dark orange colors. April, May, and June are the driest period for the southwestern United States, and most lower elevation communities receive very little, if any, rain in most years. So even above normal precipitation during these months in many locations is not much at all. It may not even help drought impacts, unfortunately. And this is the US seasonal drought outlook for up to June 30th, 2021. And it indicates that drought is likely to persist in Arizona into the summer. Most southwestern states throughout the Colorado River Basin are also brown, indicating the persistence of drought throughout the area. And this is a slide just showing the drought declarations that are currently in the state of Arizona. On November 10th, 2020, the Drought Interagency Coordinating Group met to discuss drought conditions on different scales and drought impacts on Navajo Nation, wildfire, wildlife, and the Colorado River, and the Salt and Verde River reservoirs. Based on the presentations and discussions, the ICG agreed to recommend to the governor to maintain the drought declarations currently in place. For anyone interested in learning more about the meeting and any materials for it, the meeting, you can find them on the ADWR website. The next ICG meeting will be held on May 11th and will be open to the public. So anyone interested in more information can definitely contact me. On the screen, you can see the drought emergency declarations of 1999 and the drought declaration of 2007. These drought declarations maintain the state's ability to provide emergency response and receive federal assistance when needed. And lastly, ADWR is required to submit an annual drought report to the governor's office by the end of the fiscal year for the previous water year. And water years are from October 1st to September 30th. So the 2020 drought report covers drought conditions and preparedness activities for this past water year, October 1st, 2019 up to September 30th, 2020. The report includes a summary of Arizona's drought status this past water year and outlook for the next water year, which we are currently in, drought designation information, highlights of drought conditions and preparedness activities, and the report is available on the ADWR website. And here is a short summary. The 2020 monsoon season was the hottest and driest on record for most of Arizona, and that led to significant increase in short and long-term droughts. While some parts of the state did receive precipitation, 55% of the state is currently in exceptional drought. The 3-month weather outlook shows a 50 to 60 probability of above average temperatures, and drought is expected to continue according to the US drought outlook. The Drought Interagency Coordinating Group has recommended to keep drought declarations in place since 2007, and the next meeting will be held on May 11th, 2021. And the 2020 Arizona Drought Preparedness Annual Report is available online for anyone interested in learning more about the activities and actions that happened last year. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Nemesis, for that presentation. I don't see any raised hands in our attendee list at the moment, but if you have any questions, feel free to use that raised hand feature.
Sarah, I have one thought. Could you speak, Nemesis, about any state resources available for those experiencing these drought impacts? Like if there are small water utilities that don't have cap supplies, or the ranchers, or even we submit at PAG, we submit water monitoring data for the creeks, for the impacts to creeks on drought. So yeah,
Definitely. Thank you, Mead, for the question. So some of the resources we currently have are from our partners. For example, the USDA Farm Agency has different resources regarding livestock feeding and water hauling. We also have share our resources from other different partners, for example, help with developing drought planning and preparedness from the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association. We also have resources regarding funding opportunities, for example, from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and things like that. But if you would like me to create a list of different resources, I can definitely share it with you after the meeting if you're interested.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
I gotta unmute myself. I don't see any. Oh, wait, hang on. We have a question from Grace Evans. Grace, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question. The mute is usually in the bottom left of your screen. If you hover over, at least for mine, it's the bottom left. There you go. Grace, you have the floor. We unfortunately can't hear you. Let's see. It might be trying to use a different microphone on your computer. So I think for mine, if I click the little arrow that's next to the mic, it allows you to choose a different microphone to ask a question. So I'm not sure. I still can't hear you, Grace. Like I said, my microphone has a little up arrow next to it. And if I click on it, it gives me a selection for microphones. So it might be trying to use a different microphone on your system. If you'd like, maybe you could email your question to Nemesis since we can't hear you at this time.
I'm definitely available to answer any questions that are emailed to me, and just let me know. I'm happy to talk about this more if necessary.
Thank you, Nemesis. Sorry about that, Grace. Sometimes technology doesn't always work for us. Not always our friend. So we will see here. So we'll move on to our last presentation today. It's the status of the Colorado River and Lake Mead in Arizona. And this presentation will be given by Mark Taylor. He's the Senior VP of Westland Resources and has been on the Central Arizona Water Conservation District Board for 6 years. Mark is currently the CAP Board Vice President and also Chair of the Finance, Audit, and Power Committee. Professionally, he's a civil engineer and one of the founding partners of Westland Resources. So Mark, we will hand the presentation over to you. I'll give you 12 minutes to start and give you a little heads up when your 12 minutes is up, and then we'll see about how long you have left.
All right, sounds great. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Well, thanks everybody. Good to be here. You know what I want to do today? Let's make sure I got, okay, everything's perfect. Kind of want to just spend some time. I really appreciate what Nemesis went through that really kind of set the stage for what we're dealing with on a more regional basis for our major water supply. Want to mention also Mitch Bishevsky's on the line today. He's our external coordinator for at least Southern Arizona. I mean, maybe more than that now, but Mitch is on the meeting with us today also, so appreciate that, Mitch. What we want to do is kind of talk about where our surface water comes from. Central Arizona project, the canal, essentially brings in about 40% of the water to Central Arizona. And when I'm talking about Central Arizona, I'm talking about Pima County, Pinal County, and Maricopa counties. So that's about 90% of our water for Arizona is really used in these areas. And again, we bring in about 40% of the water, about 1.6 million acre feet per year. So it's a good portion of the water, it's renewable. And I think that's what we really want to think about is it's a major source of renewable water. The other major source is Salt River Project, which really just serves the eastern region of the Phoenix metropolitan area. But of course, CAP serves the whole central Arizona. Our water comes from the Colorado River, this water does. It mainly comes from snowpack. I don't know if you can see, do you can see my arrow by chance? Nope.
Nope.
Nope, okay, well that's right. Then I'll just kind of talk about it. Most of the water for the Colorado River comes from snowpack, not rainfall. And so the snowpack is incredibly important. It's mainly, of course, up in the Colorado Rockies. And so much of what we get is based upon that. The original allocation was divided back in 1922, back in the Boulder Canyon Act. And it divided essentially the water half and half. They said the upper basin states, as you can see, are Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. They get half. They get 7.5 million acre feet per year. And then the lower basin states, which is Arizona, California, Nevada, get 7.5. And they assumed they had plenty of water back then when they made this allocation in 22. Unfortunately, they made the allocation in time of excess water flow. And so we actually, on annual average, have quite a bit less than that 15 million acre feet per year, hence the problem in the Colorado River. And then to add on to that, in 1944 treaty with Mexico, it's required to give them another 1.5 million acre feet going into Mexico. So we are definitely over allocated the river. And then you add climate change on top of that. Now what we have is a shortage on the river. The allocations, as you can see in the lower, the lower left, of that 7.5 million acre feet in the in the lower basin, Arizona gets 2.8 million acre feet. And unfortunately, when we were looking for funding through Congress to build the Central Arizona project, which is about a $4 billion project, we had to go through Congress. Took a lot of maneuvering to get approval through Congress, especially California. And the maneuvering ended up for us to get approval for those funds and build the CAP. We had to take the lowest priority on the river. So essentially that means if there's a shortage and a shortage on the river, Arizona will be the first in the major loss of that shortage. So that's something to keep in mind as we go forward on this discussion. The Colorado River is really, while we have a lot of reservoirs, there's two major reservoirs that really kind of affect everything. And on the left, you can see Lake Mead, and on the right, it's Lake Powell. And Lake Powell is the main regulating reservoir. Even though it's at the bottom of the upper basin, it's the main one that regulates where that water is decided to go for the upper basin. Lake Mead is what we look at for the lower basin, being part of the lower basin, Arizona. We always look at what the levels of Lake Mead is. And Lake Mead levels are really what determines what kind of shortage or losses that we're going to have in the lower basin, i.e. Arizona. As you can see in the white ring there in that picture, the water levels have been going down. Both Lake Mead and Lake Powell were full back in 2000, in the year 2000, 20 years ago. Lake Mead has dropped, I think, more than 150 feet since then. It's been averaging about 10 to 12 feet of loss per year. We're now at very critical levels, which we're going to go through the shortage levels that we're at. We are in a tier 0 shortage. It's kind of a new shortage that just occurred because of DCP, which we'll talk about. But the first major shortage is below 1075, and that's called a tier 1. And that's, as you'll probably already know, there's a very high potential for that next year in 2022 because of this water levels continuing to go down. And that's unfortunately when the real shortages are going to occur. I'm showing both reservoirs here because they are tied together in what's called the 2007 agreement in when shortages occur and who loses that water during a shortage. And there's a huge interrelationship between the levels of these two major reservoirs that the Bureau uses in determining what kind of releases there are. But a little complicated to get into right now, so I'm not going to get into that. This is called our bucket chart. This kind of shows we continually at CAP are always looking at what the levels of these reservoirs are. Obviously, we really look at that one to the left where you can see it's Lake Mead. You can see is at 41% full at this time. Current elevation is 1087, which is a little higher during the winter, but that's going to start dropping very quickly now, especially when we start taking water. You can see that big red line at tier 1 shortage at 1075. That's the one we always look at. And if we expect to hit 1075 or less by the end of this coming year, then we'll be in a tier 1 shortage. And right now the projection is very, very high likelihood we will be below 1075 for the first time ever since the filling of the reservoir. And that will put us in the tier 1 shortage next year. So the other reservoirs there are essentially upstream of Lake Powell, which you can see Lake Powell's at 38%. They're actually quite low for this time of year. You'd expect after especially the snow melt and everything in the upper basins to be fuller. Not a good year again, even though the snow pack is not that bad. I think it's about 85% because we've had again, a very dry summer, very dry fall, which we've had for the last couple of years. We may have a snowpack of 85% of normal, but the expectation is a 50% runoff of normal. And that's because it takes a lot of water to essentially wetten the soil as it starts flowing. And so the runoff is what we really care about. And unfortunately, again, we're expecting it to be pretty low this year. The 2007 guidelines are really important, as we said. They're 20-year guidelines. They expire in 2025 or 2026, I should say. And when they were originally adopted, I don't think it didn't appear that the significance of climate change is really known at that time. And it really set who loses water at what elevations. And it was pretty obvious that we were going to hit 1075, and we could go quite a bit low, maybe even down to 1050 when we start getting into real extreme issues with potential loss of power on both Hoover Dam and Lake Powell. And it's going to be critical elevation. So actions needed to be taken before the expiration of the 2007 guidelines. And we had to come up with a, how do you say, more equitable way other than Arizona takes all losses. And we wanted to essentially come up with taking losses earlier than was shown in the 2007 agreements. Hence, what's called the Drought Contingency Plan was developed both for the upper basin and lower basin states, essentially to take shortages earlier in a greater amount than would have been taken before under the 2007 guidelines. And this was essentially to make sure or do everything we can so that water level doesn't get too low down to the 1050 elevation where we start having some real critical issues. And this contingency plan, this DCP was a tough battle. I can't remember how many years it went through. I think I lived through most of it in years. I've been at CAP, but at least the last couple of years were quite intense negotiations to come up with a DCP. I can't remember exactly. It was about, I think it's December 19 is when it was approved, if I recall it correctly. And it put a larger burden on Arizona in the upper elevations, but it actually put a pretty high responsibility and a shortage on California in the lower elevations, where before they didn't have to take any losses at all or very little. Now they kind of share in the pain. And this includes Nevada, includes Mexico, and includes the Bureau of Reclamation. The BOR also has a responsibility to essentially not take water out of the river, or hence not take water out of Lake Mead at each one of these elevations. And because of everybody's participation in this, we probably will, how do you say, I hate to say the term, level out before we get to 1050. I think there's no doubt we're going to be in the tier 1 shortages below 1075 on and off for quite a few years, but it may not go to very extreme depths as 1050 or lower. So that's the idea behind the Drought Contingency Plan. The Drought Contingency Plan, just like the 2007 agreements, all expire at the end of 2025. So we are going to have to go through it again. It was kind of a intermediate type agreement to keep us going until 2025. But also, I think it helps us a lot because it really kind of sets a lot of the deal points that we already went through in the DCP process. And I think what it's going to do is also kind of help us through this renegotiation process of the 2007 agreement. So what happens because of the DCP? Right now, we're in tier 0, which is that purple area right now. It means Arizona essentially loses 192,000 acre feet of our 1.6 million acre feet that we bring into central Arizona. So one of the things to remember is 2 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to go pretty fast on this. Almost all of this shortage, we have 2.8 million acre feet for all Arizona. About 1 million of it is used on the Colorado River itself. The rest is brought in, the 1.6 is brought in through CAP. CAP and us in central Arizona have the lowest priority of all of Arizona. So that means when there's a shortage on the river, we are going to lose it in central Arizona. So you can see right now a tier 1 shortage is most likely going to happen next year. That's a loss of 512,000 acre feet out of our 1.6. So we're going to lose about 33% of our water next year. And one thing to remember is I don't have a priority chart on that, but who will lose that water in central Arizona? It's going to be mainly the ag community, which is going to lose all of their ag pool water. And there's also a group of priority called NIA, non-Indian ag, will lose about 40, 50, 60% of their water. M&I and the tribal communities at a tier 1 shortage will not lose any of their water. So that's one thing to think about when we're representing Tucson Water, Marana, Oro Valley. It won't be down until we get here. A tier 2 and tier 3 is when we start losing some of the M&I water, which includes Tucson Water. I think Tony Davis did a really good job in an article he had out a couple weeks ago. If you haven't read that, Tim Timur, I'm sure John is right in the middle of this, showing that even we get into a tier 2 and a tier 3, Tucson Water's in very good shape, as is a lot of the communities in southern Arizona. But it's still a huge hit when we start losing 33% of our renewable supply, and even more if we get into tier 2, 2B, and 3. So to finish this off, I want to mention we are going into what's called a reconsultation process. It's essentially a 4-year, 5-year process to essentially renegotiate these 2007 agreements. We need to finish essentially by December 31st, 2025. There's about, again, we're taking that same group that we used in the DCP process, about 40 stakeholders. These stakeholders are part of the tribes, part of municipalities, ag districts, business leaders, legislators, environmental groups. Everybody's part of this. And we've already started that process in what's called the ARC committee. And that's going to be a long process, but it's a full NEPA process. It goes through Congress, and I'm sure it'll be going through state legislature also. So kind of keep your eyes open for what we're going to be doing in that reconsultation process, because it's going to be very important to Arizona on what may happen and how these priorities can be set in the future. So I think with that, I think I must be out of time. It goes so fast. Okay,
Yeah,
Sarah,
it does go quickly.
Yes, it does. So I think it may leave a few minutes for questions. I don't know.
Yep, you were at 16 minutes, so we're okay.
Gosh, it seemed like
if there are any questions, please let us know by raising your hand. And then you can unmute yourself. I'm not seeing any raised hands at the moment. All right. So thank you, Mark. That was a comprehensive presentation.
There's a lot of stuff in one short time, but great. Glad to be here, Sarah. Thank you, Lee.
Yes, thank you for coming. So that was our last presentation for today. So we will adjourn our meeting. Thank you all so much for coming. If you have meeting presentation ideas, send those on to Lee Comrie through an email. And let's see, I don't know. Lee, do we have our next meeting? I thought we did.
We're anticipating our next meeting to be the first Friday in June, which I believe is June 4. And at that time, we'll get the summary of the updated greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And we'll approve that document is the plan. There have been some sort of initial discussions about, supporting presentations for that meeting, but that's as yet undetermined. But we are expecting early June.
Thank you, Lee. So thank you all so much for attending. We will go ahead and adjourn our meeting, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.